Thank you so much for joining us on the Patros Podcast, a ministry of Man Up. Our website, patros.us, is a great resource and place where you have free access to things like videos, other resources, as well as podcasts, where you get to just be challenged as a man to lead with purpose, grow in faith, and disciple the fatherless generation.
Yeah, and we've created this resource with you men in mind and you church leader in mind, because we know our churches need resources that equip men to go out and not only be the man that God has called you to be, but then do something about it. See, we want our orthodoxy or our right thinking to match our orthopraxy, our right doing. We can't just have one without the other. And so this resource is going to get your men to do just that.
So go ahead to patros.us and we'll see you there.
This is the counter king, so it's the kingdom turned upside down. And so when you try to go get your life, you lose it. But when you lose your life, you gain it.
All things were made for him, through him, and unto him. To know him, you are so great and so holy, and I recognize that I am nothing but dirt, but yet you have chosen me. You have chosen us.
He's not calling for surface level relationships. He's calling for something much deeper.
This weekend here, the experience that God gave us was just so much more powerful.
What's up, y'all? Welcome back to the Patros Podcast, where we're embracing healthy masculinity. If this is your first time joining us, my name is Allan. This is Jeff.
Hey.
And we are your hosts of the show. This is a ministry of Man Up. And so this week, we're actually going to be talking about the theme from the fourth session of the Counter Kingdom. It's kind of our session on DEI, some would say.
Ooh,
but
DEI.
True kingdom, counter kingdom style DEI, where we're just talking about inclusivity over exclusivity. What do you think about this?
Man, it feels super like trendy.
Yeah.
And like we're on the right side of history. But the historical DEI comes from Jesus out of all people, which is interesting, right?
Yep.
When we think of Jesus, you know, I think most people have good feelings when they think of Jesus.
Yeah, and then if they don't, they're wrong.
Well, and if they don't, it's probably because
you don't have a right view of Jesus, maybe, or
I was going to say some
person.
Yeah, I can't say the word.
Scumbag.
I'm thinking. Some scumbag introduced Jesus in a way that was inconsistent with who Jesus is,
or some person with well-intended person just didn't know what they were doing at the time, and
maybe
sometimes helping hurts.
that happens. We just read that as a stat. So anyhow, we're going to get into DEI. Like, okay, diversity, equity, and inclusion. This lesson is all
Kingdom
about
version.
Inclusivity over exclusivity. But there's a little bit of a rub there, right? Because does it mean that everybody is in the kingdom?
Yeah.
So we want to talk about that, but
just even diving into like what does God think about this, right? Because we have this culture war around DEI, where if you're conservative, you're just like, that's just a bunch of virtue signaling. This is not a meritocracy. This is you guys just giving things to people that for the sake of stuff that
getting votes
that we don't have control over. My skin color, where I'm from, whatever. And then if you're on the other side, you're like, wait, we should value all these things. What's people's skin color, people's culture. And so that culture war that's around DEI, maybe there's a different way to look at it. Maybe there's a way that we could biblically approach it.
Yep. So we want to look at, how did Jesus view inclusivity? How did he view DEI? And, is that something? And how do we respond to that?
Yeah.
And so thinking about modern ways to connect to some of these biblical stories.
Yeah.
And so we're going to actually spend a lot of our time. And, we do encourage you to go check out. This is session 4 in the Counter Kingdom on the Patros site, so patros.us. Go check out the fourth lesson, and you can get the study guide there as well. But I want to start with Luke 4, 18 and 19. Jesus comes on the scene, and they're basically saying, hey, are you the guy? And he's like, yeah, I am. I'm that guy. I'm him. I think he says this. You can check me on the context here. I think he says this in the synagogue or in the temple, but he says, the Spirit of the Lord, and he's reading from, I guess I want to say it's Isaiah. The Spirit of the Lord is on me because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners. So think about those who are. How many times do you hear about poverty in our culture?
All the time.
Those who are in poor. We got to help the poor.
Yeah.
Like we have this many living in poverty level, this many living in, right?
Yeah.
Like all the time we hear
Yeah.
about poverty. So Jesus came to proclaim good news to these people. Okay. He sent me to proclaim freedom for prisoners. How many people are in our jails?
Too many.
Too many.
Yeah, I think.
And most of them are dudes. I think last I saw, it was somewhere in the high 80s.
Yeah.
Percentile was men in our prison system. Now you're getting females that are going in as well. But traditionally, if you look at violence in our culture, who's it committed by?
Yeah,
Committed by males.
I think it's also typically young males. It's
Young
like,
males?
Yeah. Where your testosterone's starting to spike.
It's high.
But I think so. The United States has the highest number of incarcerated people in the world, with almost 1.8 million in prison by the end of 2023. China had the second highest, where China has 3 times our people.
3 times our people.
So
less people.
They're
actually.
behind us. Yeah, per capita, they have like way less than us.
Yeah, and see, that's like That's an interesting thought. You go, well, why are we so high in incarceration? If we are supposedly the freest nation and we value all people.
That might be what China would say is, yeah, you guys got a little too much freedom.
Let's crack the whip. But look what
But yeah.
Jesus says. I'm proclaiming freedom for these prisoners. So if you are in jail, if you are in prison,
Yeah.
I'm here to set you free. Obviously, there's much more than just open up a door to a locked cell.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, no, and Jesus later, right, when he talks about Judgment Day, he says, when I talk to my sheep, I'll say, you visited me
correct.
in prison.
You visited me, like in that Matthew 25 passage, right?
Yeah.
And then he says, you sent me to proclaim the prison and then recovery of sight for the blind. So you sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners and recovery of sight for the blind. So now you've got your sick, you've got your poor, you've got your imprisoned, you have your sick. To set the oppressed free and to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. I don't know about you, but when I just naturally think of the people that I want to hang out with, can I be frank? It's not the poor. It's not those in prison. It's not those who are sick.
Well, it's not natural as a person,
right?
As a human.
I
Because
know.
there's no self-interest.
There's no self-interest. Spending time with those people is completely the opposite of self-interest. It's others' interest. And if I'm being honest about my natural self, that's not who I want to spend time with. And it's not the people, and especially at Jesus' day, they did not view people like that, very much like today,
Yeah.
in some regards, with any kind of favor or esteem.
Well, what is, like, when you scroll online, if anybody, and for sure anybody watching follows motivational pages, what does it always say? The 5 people you surround yourself with are gonna change it, or like you're a sum of the people around you. Surround yourself with successful people. Be the poorest in the room.
Yeah.
Be the dumbest in the room that you're in. So everything is about, if you want to better your life, to therefore
Social climbing
Which
with
is
those
true.
who, and it is true.
there's truth to it. of,
There's a
like-
truth to all of that.
Yeah. I mean,
But
the
if-
scriptures even speak to like being around wise people,
Sure.
wise counsel.
Sure.
So your relationship with people matters, but how that relationship, like what's the point of it?
Yeah.
And so Jesus is saying, like he's not contradicting the rest of scripture that talks about, hey, be around wise counsel, be around, but he's saying, but you don't also abandon.
Well, yeah, and when he, in Matthew 4, which is in the lesson, he comes and he announces the kingdom of heaven. That's kind of what he's doing here. But when he announces the kingdom of heaven, he doesn't announce it essentially to the Sadducees, who are the rich kind of ruling elite that were cozied up to Rome. He didn't announce it to the Pharisees, who were, the religious elite and held all the cards in the society. He came to, and he didn't announce it to the zealots, who wanted to overthrow Rome, those who were interested in political power. He came to poor people. He came to sick people. He came to jailed people.
Yeah. Who would be labeled criminal.
criminal
by common people.
for sure.
Yeah.
So it's just wild to me that the counter kingdom is actually like what Jesus is saying is my kingdom is made up of something that is counter to what is intuitive for you. And therefore, like I think it behooves us to make sure we understand we cannot trust how we think. Like how we think is marred by sin and self-interest.
Yeah.
And so, looking at how Jesus came and said, hey, DEI is actually about including the marginalized. So what's interesting is if we were to think about today's terms, that's kind of what it is around, right?
Yeah.
We need diversity, we need equity, we need inclusion. And if we were to talk to Jesus, his kingdom is made up, it's very diverse.
Yeah.
Right? Every tongue, tribe, and nation. So for any of you racists out there,
Yeah.
and you call yourself a Jesus follower, no, you're not.
Yeah.
Newsflash, you're not following Jesus.
You follow Jesus. You didn't even know.
He's
diverse.
He's Latino and Middle Eastern.
Yeah, he calls us. But he calls everybody. And so you're going to be, if you go into heaven, if you're racist, Jesus forgives. But if you end up in heaven, you're going to be worshiping with a lot of people that don't look like you and don't talk like you.
I mean, and listen, we all have our hang-ups, you know, and for some people, race is a huge hang-up. It's not for me. Like, it just never has been.
Yeah.
And I grew up in, like, Whiteville, too. But we played a lot of, like, we went on the road and played a lot of brothers in the city for basketball tournaments and things like that. So I just was around it a lot more, maybe. But I just had never thought, it never made sense to me that if somebody's skin color is the only thing that differentiates a person from a person, why no one had any control over that?
Yeah.
So why would someone be
Look
better
down
than
at somebody?
I don't get that.
Yeah.
I've never understood that. Like, how does that even make sense?
Well, that's why they say it's taught. It's not something that you just have. People taught that to you as a child.
Yeah, like sinful. And you watch kids and they're so the kingdom is going to be full of, all kinds of diverse, and sundry ethnicities. And then you've got equity. Well, we are all equal at the foot of the throne, which means BC, like prior to Christ, before Christ, BC, we're all sinners. And once we accept Christ, we're all saints. Like we've been brought into the family. We're all adopted. We're all children. So we're all equal. There's no right? There is ultimate equity with that. And then inclusion, right? Which is kind of what our topic is today, is what does it mean to be inclusive in the kingdom? And how can we as men embrace this idea of inclusivity? Because when we hear DEI, let's be honest, for a majority of the folks that
depending what side you land on,
depending what you
it
land
triggers
on.
you in a different way.
Correct. But the majority of the people that I run with, at least that are in my natural kind of sphere, they hear that and they go, it's important, but we need to define terms.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, what do we mean by these things? Do we do it because we're ticking a box and virtue signaling?
Yeah, token diversity versus true diversity, which is I find value in you, and I'm happy about your diversity, like those traits that you have that are diverse. But that's not why I love you. That's not why I value you.
Correct.
Yeah.
Speaking of diversity, this is Bunny Trail, but I just want people to make sure they know I'm wearing a Tampa Bay Buccaneers championship hat. I'm not a Buccaneers fan, but in the spirit of diversity, I'm wearing it in honor of my Latino friend, Raul Serrano, because today's his birthday.
Oh.
So, Doc, I'm sure you watch every episode.
They
don't know what his birthday is. It's just today it is, though. I'm wearing this hat in honor of you.
That's hilarious.
Feliz cumpleaños. But anyway, so let's get into let's first camp on this. Like, in Jesus' day, they really felt the blessing of God was based on like this connection between health and wealth. Like if you were healthy and wealthy, then you had God's favor rest upon you. And if you remember John 9, there was the cripple. He was born that way.
But they're like, what did he do?
What did he do to get that?
Yeah.
And Jesus like, nothing. I just so when people say, how could God, if you hear the evolutionists will say this, right? Where it's like, oh, well, if there's design, then why do we have
if he's a loving God, why would he allow
all of these things? And it's like, well, no, there's we take into account something called sin. Sin just not only marred how we think, but it mars literally our body and how the DNA, when it reproduces cells, it mutates and it doesn't follow the code it was supposed to follow. So we literally have like sin in our body through like DNA that didn't code correctly, right? So he's saying, and I'm gonna produce glory in this guy. So the disciples thought this was a common thought. Do we still do that today? Do we think as a culture that just some kind of magical favor or blessing just rests on some people, and that if you're healthy and wealthy, that must means God loves you?
You're asking?
Yeah.
I think so. I think in different ways. Like, I think some people see certain situations and they're like, well, that's what they get. Like, because karma, a lot of people believe in karma, the universe.
Right.
Like, I'm talking outside of Christianity, a lot of people believe in, like, what you put out there is what will come back to you. So, yeah, I think a lot of people think that.
Is that a biblical view, would you say?
Not at all.
Okay.
Yeah. I think it's biblical to understand that God has designed nature and that there's consequences, there's patterns, there's a certain level of things that happen in our lives based on the fact that we made poor decisions or good decisions. And then depending on where you live, those good decisions can bring you to wealth. There's certain places where great decisions, you'll still remain in poverty because that's just not a thing, you know? But so I think, there's certain things that are within our control of their consequential circumstances. And then there's circumstances that are completely outside of our control that we can't determine why they happen, when they happen, or how they happen. And some people would say that's based on, like God's trying to get your attention. And I think that that's sometimes true. But I don't know how we can ever know whether or not it's true. And so for me personally, the way that I assess it is God is sovereign and he's in control. He either desired this to happen for a reason or has allowed this to happen because we live in a broken world. But what I do know is because of what Romans says is that all things will work together for good to those that love him. I don't know if any of that makes sense.
I think you just confused everyone.
Well, because there's
I'm totally playing.
There's so much to it with that question.
It's the two sides of it, right? There are principles in the scripture that if we follow them, they do produce stability and they produce wealth and they produce,
depending on the context you live in.
Correct. You know,
because
you have basic principles in the scripture that speak to this. I mean, Proverbs is full of it, right? And if you're a fool and you're gambling your money, if you're not working hard, I mean, those are basic principles, right? Is there something that says, well, you know, because I have money, God loves me?
No.
Absolutely not, right? Because it could be that God is sending a hurricane, which we just had here, to get your attention on your money. And so I'm going to take away that beach house. I'm going to take away, you know, there were some people, I heard of some people in the Tampa area where we live whose South Tampa home was taken out and flooded. Their beach house on Madeira Beach was taken out, and their mountain home in Carolina was taken out. I mean, taken out, like all three were damaged in severe ways. And so when you look at that, you go, man, is that just bad luck for you? And that's what I mean.
You don't know. And that's I guess what I'm getting to is like, you have prosperity gospel that will use that and say, like, you got to get something right with the Lord. Or they'd be like, you just need to donate more because he's going to 10x that the way he did with Job. He took everything away and then gave Job 10 more. You know, he doubled it. You have those people. I don't believe that. Do I believe that it's possible that God wants to get somebody's attention, specific situations? Maybe. I don't know. Do I just do I at the core,
it is possible.
It's possible.
We would definitely say it's possible.
I think biblically, just theologically, what you can for sure say is that we just live in a broken world and bad things happen and good things happen to all. There's like a common all of us have a common ground where it's not favored to be wealthy because there's some very evil wealthy people.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. But this idea of, I mean, in Jesus' day, they definitely viewed wealth as like they believed the
it
favor
was
of
black
God
and white
rests upon you, right? And so in our day and age, and then if you think about and so there was this favoritism, right? There's a favoritism that happened, and so you would say, well, those on whom the favor of God rests, we should listen to what they say because clearly, God favors them, and He doesn't favor me as the poor person. He doesn't favor me as the sick person.
Yeah,
He doesn't favor, right? And yet,
so it's almost like God was a classist in their eyes.
Correct.
Yeah,
and so. And then you look at the Jews were obviously very, very set apart, right? They were set apart, and they thought, well, we know the true God of the universe, and you guys are all worshiping pagans. We worship the true God, and so even in that, you have a favoritism, right? Where it says we know the way, and that's the charge that people make against Christians. Well, you guys are just showing favoritism, right? You're being elitist, you're being exclusive. And actually, the message we would say is actually the opposite. But what happened think about what happened in Galatians when Paul confronts Peter. Peter was going back to his Jewish ways, and we just have this penchant as people to place certain groups above others. And you think about it, you walk into any room, and you immediately look around, and you're going, "Where am I in the pecking order?"
Yeah.
And who do you think is at the highest? The wealthy, the talented.
Yeah.
Right? The famous, the, whatever. You immediately do that in your flesh. And Jesus, and that's not very DEI.
No.
That's not a DEI-friendly policy. But all these people making DEI policies, I guarantee they walk into a room, and that's what they're doing.
Yeah.
And they're wanting to cozy up to the people who are rich, cozy up to the people who are powerful, right? And so I'm saying, DEI is a great idea. I love it.
Done biblically.
Done in the way Jesus does it. Whereas, he wouldn't have got into that room, and first of all, he doesn't look at anybody as greater than or not, right? He views them all as having inherent worth in front of God, but also all those in need of a Savior, right? So on that sense, there's that. But it's he comes to the poor, the prisoners, and the blind, as in this passage we read earlier, which to me is an odd way to announce the kingdom.
Yeah.
Right? And so there has to be a greater piece that he's getting to where in some ways he's taken that DEI and going, hey, I am going to prioritize these people, not because they are inherently worth more than the rich or the wealthy, but because you guys have so skewed the worth of humans and skewed it towards the powerful, the talented, and the rich that these folks over here are getting marginalized and forgotten. And you're assuming that they're cursed. And I'm here to tell you, they're not cursed.
Yeah.
This wasn't because of what they did.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, there are choices we make. We could be sick because we're smoking 10 packs a day and
that's where it's different.
Correct.
But it's not black and white in the sense of your sickness means God has cursed you.
Correct.
God doesn't love you. Yeah, I was listening to something the other day, and that's one of the things that they did. I think it was a debate between an evolutionist and a Christian, and that's where the Christian was telling the evolutionist, look, the atheist, your values on whether or not Hitler was good or all these people, it's all based on Christianity, on our morals. Our morals derive from the scriptures, which is that regardless of how wealthy you are or poor you are, you bear the image of God. Yeah. And that's why Christianity holds the true DEI, because equity, value, all these things is based on the fact that no matter who we are, how much money is in our pocket, or what we look like, we bear God's image. Meaning the way that we bear God's image is so much deeper than our skin color. Yeah. It's diverse in thought, diverse in, so many things. Yeah.
So let's talk about some of the specific ways we're guilty of this in the church, and as men, we can fall into these traps. I honestly think, and I don't know, you may disagree with me on this, and the ladies that are watching, I'd be interested in their perspective. I think this sometimes hits women more than it does men, in as much as they would say well, we've been marginalized as a gender since the inception, right? And so I think in some ways they're able to see it more. They see the inequities more just because they've lived it. True. And even today, where we would say, yeah, women, yes, they have the right to vote, but shoot, we got CEOs, we got a female, for president. Like we've come a long way, so women have a lot of, I would say, but there still is this basic inequality, to the genders, in as much as, like, why is there all this rape? Why is there all this, hitting of females? And like you hear all the time about like unsafe work cultures and all of that. And it's because we're stronger. Yeah. So there's physically, we're just physically stronger. I'm not talking about mentally. I mean, we are physically stronger. So if you're smarter than me and you make fun of me and like you're witty and you're, better looking and all this, I still am stronger. And so if I want to take you down, I can't. Like there's that in a lot of males, right? Yeah. They have that in the back pocket. It's like the ace in the hole. You mind your business, woman, but if you don't, remember, I can take you out because I'm stronger than you. And I think women live under that oppression. They live under that, always knowing like...
Yeah, there's a feeling there of inequity.
Of inequity, just based on, even though it's nothing that anybody did. It's God, it's how God created us, right? It's that whole design thing. So I wanted to look at, some of those things that we deal with in terms of equity. And the first story I want to go to is Luke 19. And this is Luke 19, verses 1 through 9. And this is the story of Zacchaeus. So what's if you want to read it, you can read it, or you can give us what's the breakdown of Zacchaeus? What's the story there?
Zacchaeus was a
wee little man, a wee little man was he. Okay, so we all know the story.
No, but he was the chief tax collector, which for people that don't know, we were talking about this earlier, where you were saying like it wasn't the same how we have tax collectors here that are like they're regulated, they're government appointed, and it's not like subcontractors, like they actually work for the government. Whereas tax collectors back then, like people hated them because they just were self-profiting off of people's need to pay the taxes to the kingdom.
The tax collectors in Jesus' day
were corrupt.
They were corrupt. I was reading, like, I'll read this.
Yeah, didn't you do some like research?
Yeah, I just like they were usually Jewish men who worked in close association with the Romans, right? And so they paid a fixed sum for the right to collect. So it's like, I want to be a tax collector. So the Romans would say, okay, well, who's the highest bidder? And basically, whoever the highest bidder was, that they got to be a tax collector.
You bid for a contract the way that people do
for
other things. Yeah.
Correct. And so anything that they could collect above what they paid for the franchise was profit, right? So this led to considerable abuse. For instance, tax collectors would open every carton of traded goods and arbitrarily assess its value. So it would be like someone came from a foreign land, they were bringing in, stuff, or maybe you went out to get it and you came in, or maybe you just came into the town or whatever, and it would be tax time, and they'd look in your carton of, pumpkins, because it's fall. And be like, man, those 3 tiny little pumpkins, that's like $500.
Yeah.
And you're like, what?
Yeah.
It's not worth $500. He's like, no, price has gone up. The cost of, donkey fuel. I don't know. Whatever the reason was.
Donkey fuel, you mean grains?
You mean grass? We're not having grass right now. We're in a drought, So, so the assessments were artificially high, and they would just skim off the top, right, of those. There was no recourse. There was for like unjust assessments. Like you just had to accept it, like whatever they said.
They're the authority on that.
Correct.
And so you're looking at them and being like, I can't believe this guy is like doing this to me right now, and I can't do anything about it.
Can't do anything about it. And then they would also extort. So they would like make false charges of smuggling. So they'd be like, hey, you haven't shown us what you actually have. I know that you deal in this business, and last year you brought us 10 barrels, and this year you only brought us 5,
Yeah.
And they're like, well, that's all I had. I had a down year. Like, no, I know you had 10, but I'll make it go away if you do this.
Yeah, so people didn't just not like them because they were collecting taxes. People didn't like them because, like, they were hurting people in a way that you felt it.
Correct.
Like, you have 1,000 shekels or whatever.
Yeah.
They're taking way more than that they even should be. They know that you know. There's a transaction happening, and you're like, they're putting me in a really bad position. I can't feed my family with the rest of this money.
Right.
Because that's like they're taking advantage of the poor.
Correct.
And so the poor are looking at them like you
Well, people are
you're
being
ruining
driven into poverty.
because of them.
Because
and so it's not even just somebody that, because I'm sure in a capitalistic society, for someone listening, it's like, yeah, he's a tax collector. I mean, I get it, but like none of us like taxes. It's like, no. It's a situation where a single man is doing something that's putting someone in a bad situation financially, potentially not being able to feed family or even travel.
Correct.
And
And so they're it was anywhere from 30 to 50 is my research, but you're talking probably 40 to 50% of their income in a year was taxed. And so it wasn't based on like your income level.
You weren't able to plan for it.
Yeah.
It wasn't like, okay, I know this year I'm going to get taxed this much. It was like, no, they might just kill me on the next.
You would have no idea. So so they paid, a ton of tax as it was, and it was gained illegally. And so these people were hated. And in Zacchaeus's, in that story, right, Jesus comes, he climbs up on the sycamore tree.
Yeah.
Does it even say sycamore in the Bible?
Could not.
Or does it just say he climbed up on a tree?
Yeah, sycamore.
A sycamore tree.
So it says he climbed up on a sycamore tree to see him, for he was about to pass that way. Jesus came to that place. He looked up and said, Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, for I must stay at your house today.
Going to your house today.
But so then he hurried down, received him joyfully. So he received Jesus joyfully. And when they saw it, so the people saw it, they grumbled. He has gone in to be the guest of a man who is a sinner. And Zacchaeus stood and said to the Lord, Behold, Lord, the half of my goods I give to the poor. And if I have defrauded anyone of anything, I restore it fourfold. And Jesus said to him, Today salvation has come to this house, since he also is the son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and save the lost.
Yeah, so you have what is probably, in my research, the most despised.
Yeah, greedy scum.
It would be like kind of like a slumlord.
Yeah.
Right? So if we try to put it in today's parlance, who is this person?
Yeah.
Like it's like a slumlord. Maybe he's a sleazy car salesman, like a payday loan.
Yeah, somebody that, I mean, literally, it's hard to even think about because we have laws that protect people from these people.
Right.
So like a sleazy car salesman would get sued for taking advantage of an 80-year-old woman that needs a new car, and he just got her to buy on her Social Security $150,000 truck.
Yeah, or if he extorted her,
there's laws in place.
And we were able to catch that.
Yeah.
The Romans didn't care.
Yeah,
these were second-class citizens. These were Jews, So, maybe that, I thought even maybe it's like the politicians, because politicians, and we use
some are above the law in the sense, or at least they're treated so. There's a lot of hush behind, like we don't put that Jeff Epstein list out because we protect these. Yeah,
correct. And there's a lot of things that happen by, quite frankly, extortion.
Yeah,
or by a nod and a wink, right? Like
scratch your back, you scratch my
bribing
back.
Others, like
I came
a
into
bunch of
office
quid pro quo.
Yeah, I came into office worth $2 million. I leave worth $100 million.
Yeah, like a lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
And so I think, for Jesus to come and say, "I love the slumlord. I love the sleazy car salesman."
And that's like a stab in the back to the people. They're looking at Jesus like,
yeah.
whoa.
Like, hold on. You're going to love this guy? What about me? He even loves politicians.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
But then you see it's that Jesus, it's that whole idea that I think you said it earlier, like the sinner becomes the saint.
yeah.
And so I love him, but it's a transformative love.
Correct.
So it's inclusive. It's exclusive love in the sense of you become someone that is exclusively in the kingdom. But I'm inclusive to even the slumlord.
I'm inclusive to everyone.
The invitation is
for the
slumlord and the
everyone.
poor.
Like, there's no one that is too far.
It's for the oppressor and the oppressed.
Correct. And in this case, you've got
The oppressor
who is like even the oppressors. So even the people that are making, yes, they have the invitation. And I think sometimes we think I'm not trying to be controversial, but even the person who rapes, even the person who, defrauds, even the person who kills.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that there is not a tremendous amount of pain that goes with those situations.
And that justice shouldn't be
and
had.
that justice shouldn't be meted out because justice should be on this side of heaven. We need to do as best we can to commit that situation to justice.
You look at Jesus on the cross. He doesn't stop the criminal from getting when the criminal beside him
he dies
with him as a criminal. Jesus doesn't stop him from dying as a criminal. He just says, I'll see you in paradise.
But he offers the kingdom.
But earthly justice still has to happen to you.
Correct.
Yeah.
So he offers the kingdom, but there is justice. So it's a hard way to think about because we recoil at that. And I get it. I mean, there's this case right now over in France where they drugged this lady, right? Have you heard of this case? Yeah, they drugged this lady. Her husband would give her a date rape drug and invite his friends over.
No.
And these are like, they're like teachers and workers and like they're normal people. And somehow they got it in their mind that it was okay to do this. Because like even in some of the conversations, one of the first guys that did it, because he ended up saying, yeah, do it to my wife too. And he's like, and I felt bad about it. Like I knew something was wrong about it, but like it was like the way it was presented, it wasn't like this real super evil intent. It was like this slippery slope where it's like almost like they
gradually faded into darkness.
They just gradually faded into this place where they're like, I guess this is okay. I'm like, it's wild, right? But it shows you the because now they're like really repentant about it. They're like, we shouldn't have done it. It was wrong. Like now that it's been dragged into the light, they see. But you can get so far down into a spot.
That's
insane.
Like,
even those guys.
Jesus looks at
Jesus is the kingdom is
you
open
bear
to
my
you.
image.
It's open to you. Now, there's justice, there's penalty for sin, like in the short term, but I can erase that penalty long term. And I can because his kingdom is an eternal forever kingdom, right? So anyway, that was one of those that I thought was, as we're thinking about how do we as men embrace, like, we cannot prejudge these people and just condemn them to hell. So DEI for us as Christian men has got to be like, no, like the gospel of God is able to save even the vilest of sinner, even the vilest of cheater and scumbag and whatever he can save. And we cannot prejudge those moments. It may be our prejudgment and our attitude towards them is what seals their disdain for God and like, you know what, I don't want it then.
Yeah.
Now, I know they're responsible for their own choices, but they look at Christians and go, what are you offering me? And if we're not offering them that hope, right, same hope. So another category of people would be in Luke 17, 11 to 19, there is the story of Jesus healing 10 lepers. So in Jesus' day, would lepers have been part of the in crowd?
I mean, to the point where people had them living separately. You don't touch them. You don't get near them.
Their own colonies.
Yeah. I mean, you're not trying to get anything that they have because it's
and
cursed.
Listen, we've worked with lepers in Ethiopia, and it is a modern day thing still in certain parts. And when you look at the hands and the flesh is just eaten away, like they don't have fingers. They just have nubs. And it's just slowly over time, the flesh eats away. So it's a terrible.
Yeah. So as a person, you're like, I don't want that to happen to me.
Correct.
Yeah.
So Jesus comes along and, this goes back to, those who are sick, right? Sight for the blind. Those who are sick, he goes to them and he heals them. And he says, go do what Moses told you to do, like go cleanse and like, because these were mainly Jews. Well, there's one that comes back. And if you read it, what does it say?
It was 17.
11 and 19.
Yeah. So you want me to read the whole
No,
thing?
no, but at the end, like.
Yeah, the Samaritan. Okay, right here. Then one of them, when he saw that he was healed, turned back, praising God with a loud voice, and he fell on his face at Jesus' feet, giving him thanks. Now, he was a Samaritan. Then Jesus answered, were not 10 cleansed? Where are the 9? Was no one found to return and give praise to God except this foreigner? And he said to him, rise and go your way. Your faith has made you well.
Right. So the story is wild because not only did he go to the outcasts who are lepers and their own, living on their own, but who in particular does he signal out? A Samaritan. So a Samaritan would have been someone who was basically not a pure Jew. And then doing some research on this, what a lot of foreign kings would do is, like, for instance, when the king of Babylonian conquered and deported most of the Israelites, he left in the region of Judea, like the sick and the the elderly, and right he took the quote unquote best. And he left those, and then he would populate the land with other foreigners. So what he did is he would try to mix up cultures so that they would lose the culture. Does that make sense?
Okay.
So it was a way of controlling.
So you would like dilute
what they
their
believe,
heritage,
because that makes them strong. When you fight for your family, you fight for your country.
Yeah.
But if you are like, I'm kind of this and I'm kind of that, then that's how they would
your allegiance goes away.
Correct.
Yeah.
So then when the Jews came back into the land and started living, they realized, well, wait a second, there's all these like non-true Jews. And so in the 400 years that passed, basically, by Jesus' time, they hated the Samaritans. So much so that the Samaritans had created their own temple, right? They didn't even go to worship. So you remember the story in John 4. He visits the woman at the well. He says, you Jews say that we need to be worship in Judea, in Jerusalem. And he's like, we worship on this mountain, right? And it's because they had their own temple. They were ostracized. They had been outcasts. So at this time, anybody who was a Jew would have hated. So this goes to, like, if we're thinking about our modern day, like, how does this apply to us as men? How can we live in the counter kingdom when it comes to this being a DEI Jesus guy? We have, I mean, what are you taking from this?
Well, I'm taking from it literally like, where Christ says, like, when he talks, what does he say? He says, like, to turn your cheek when somebody hits you, to give the shirt off your back when somebody steals from you, like, to always go but then what does he say? He says to love your enemy. And so even for the Jew, to love the Samaritan, because Jesus is the Jew. And he's even blessing a Samaritan. So the foreigner. So for today, when you're tying it to today's thing, it is that the person that you disagree with on the Israel-Palestine situation,
for sure,
like you just had a full-on fight with somebody on this whole conversation, to love and understand them. It's the Republican and the Democrat and the Libertarian and whoever else.
If you're a Republican, is the kingdom of God open to a Democrat?
Are you willing to look at a Democrat and say, I love you, and not in a condescending way say I'm praying for you, but like, I genuinely care for you. How can I be ensuring that you know God?
Correct.
And the same way, the other way, if you're a Democrat and a Christian, like, are you looking at the Republicans, say, I disagree with you on policies and everything like that, or on Trump or whatever, but I love you and I care for you.
I agree with you in this much, that you're a image bearer. Of the Most High King, and so because you are, my viewpoints are not even like I'm not superior to you, and you're not superior to me. Now, there are superior viewpoints, I think, and we can discuss those. But I'm never going to leave this conversation with hatred towards you in my heart.
Yes.
I may not like what you actually think about it, but if we can at least dialogue about it and then leave the table, and that's what's missing. And I see a lot of men, man. I've been in a lot of, and you know what? I don't know. I won't say that. There's a lot of men that I've been around who are just very, I think, demeaning towards those who don't believe how they are politically, right? So I'll be in a conversation where it's all friendly fire, and they're just, it goes beyond the merit of the idea. It becomes a personal attack.
Well, that's what everybody has to do, because that's how you, if you can't win a conversation with your ideas, you then attack people's character or value.
And in this case, you have someone who is a different race. So you have the racial piece of it,
or nationality, or
correct. And they even in the scriptures it talks about this foreigner. So he's literally talking about a foreigner of a different race, and so I can't help but think about immigration. And I think so what does it mean to be DEI, like the counter kingdom? So it's one thing to talk about the kingdom of heaven, and the kingdom of heaven is open to every immigrant that is in our country. And as we go over to another country, it's open to us.
Yeah, there's a difference between understanding that somebody is valuable, you should care about them. And let's say even like on the street, you see somebody, you take care of their situation like the Good Samaritan did.
Yeah.
But the Good Samaritan made sure that the person was safely put in a hotel, XYZ. There was a process to ensuring the safety and the value of the human, but you also don't see the Good Samaritan take the person with them into their home. And that's different for everybody. But I'm saying is that you can see an immigrant, like someone that's undocumented, and that there's layers to that, as valuable and invited into the kingdom, and still have differentiating views on what the process is as a country on how to handle them without devaluing them. And some people do.
And I do see some people, and I would say it's probably more than I would like to admit.
It's polarizing.
From a Christian perspective. Like people who would name the name of Christ, who would say...
Well, they treat them like scum.
Yeah, like, what's wrong with you? Get out of our country. Like,
yes.
you need to follow the rules. This is a law-abiding... All of which is true. You can be true and wrong at the same time.
Yep.
Like, you can be right with the facts, but wrong in your approach. Because it's all about how it's a matter of the heart. It's like Jesus said. So there, and the great example is the Pharisees, right? Like the Pharisees were right basically in their theology.
Yeah.
And they were wrong in how they gave that theology to others, right? And how they lived their lives. So I just think that we really need to be careful. Jesus came to offer the kingdom to these people as well. Yeah. And while the kingdom of America might not be open in some ways because there are laws, and you need to be a law-abiding citizen, our attitude towards these people should be nothing but inclusive.
Yeah.
Right? In terms of the kingdom. Yeah. Like Jesus' kingdom. And I just think we need to be careful. I am not saying let's break down the law and let's change the law and I'm not advocating for that. I'm also not advocating for that. Like I'm saying maybe there's a pathway forward where we can say, hey, if you were, if you're contributing to our country, like contributing in a way that is helpful and that, I'm ignorant of this.
There's so much nuance to it.
There's so much nuance. But like I do know that there are people who are like, hey, listen, they're doing jobs that I can't get other people to do. So they actually are contributing to the culture that way. Like, so I do think there's a pathway forward. We can't be so blanket about it. But the fear mongering and the hatred, that's wrong.
Not Christ.
And it's also wrong to just say, yeah, just come in. We'll just forgive everything. Well, there's consequences
not be careful and not be thoughtful about how because that's why when you hear about the essay that happens at the border, that so many women are actually endangered. So not being careful also hurts the person that you're saying that you're advocating for.
Yeah, correct.
So across the board, what we're saying right now is you need to value people. You need to understand that image bearers are image bearers, regardless of where they're from, what they look like, or even how they act. And that the counter kingdom values everybody, including the criminal, including the oppressed, and even the oppressor, who many in our society today will say is worse than the oppressed. And so Jesus looks at each and every one of us, regardless of where we're at, and says, I invite you into my kingdom.
Yeah, that's right. And that is that's healthy DEI.
Yeah. I don't invite you into my kingdom to remain in sin or oppressing others, because what does Zacchaeus then do, right? He transforms. He doesn't
he gave all that money back.
And he doesn't even give them back what he took.
He gave them back four times as much.
Yeah.
I think the government should do that
without having to go to courts or anything. He literally just does. Yeah.
I'm a big
give me my taxes 4 times back.
Yeah. I'm not big on our federal government telling us what to do. They need to continue to work on that. Jesus, thank you. All right, let's move, just in the time we have left, let's move to one last story that Jesus brings up, and talking DEI here. What does appropriate DEI look like? Because counter kingdom is different than the world's kingdom. This comes from Luke 7. So again, and the interesting thing about this is Luke 7, 36 to 50, if you're at home and you want to open up your Bible. But I love that Luke is doing all of this, because Luke was the gospel writer to what?
To the Jews.
Who did he write to?
Well, he wrote, hold on. Luke was the doctor.
And he wrote to?
Not the Jews.
Not the Jews.
The Gentiles?
The Gentiles.
Who wrote to the Jews?
Matthew. Matthew wrote to the Jews.
And then Mark?
Mark wrote to the Romans.
And then Luke wrote to the Jews.
Yep.
But he's the most detailed.
What Luke does is he is explaining things and couching them away. It's kind of like the New Living Translation.
I always get cold feet when Jeff quizzes me out.
Sorry. I'm not trying to put you on the spot.
Bro, it just makes me.
I question everything.
Is Mark even in the Bible?
What's his name? Greg? No. What were we even talking about?
So you're saying Luke
So
wrote
you
to the
taking
Jews?
me? Oh yeah. Luke didn't write to the Jews. He wrote to the Gentiles.
I mean, yeah.
You're throwing me off. So Luke wrote to the Gentiles, who traditionally were what? Not included. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting that the writer to the Gentiles who is saying, you are included in the kingdom. Like, you can be included. It's open to all. It's the same God and Father who has always been, who has always existed from the Genesis, account. That's him. Like, he's all of ours. And he's making this point of, here's how you can be included in spreading this message. And so, like, all of these examples, Zacchaeus, the lepers, the Samaritan, and now this story of the sinful woman, all come from Luke. It's like Luke was kind of going out of his way, understanding his Gentile audience. Guys, we're included. And so he includes all of these stories. Some of them you don't find in the other Gospels, and some of them you do, but he's also like, oh, yeah, this fits my narrative, because he's wrote with a narrative.
Of the audience.
And that's, side note here, studying the Bible, you have to know the audience, because if you don't know the audience, you're not going to understand the purpose.
The context.
And people will be like, oh, there's contradictions. No, there's not. What there is a different perspective. I have a different reason for why I'm telling this story, and I'm going to include details that so-and-so didn't include, or like I may even present a seemingly contradictory point, but that's because there's so much nuance in how Jesus taught that I want to bring out the nuance on this other side, and then I'm going to let the reader figure it out.
Because I'm writing it for these people who will understand why I brought that up.
Why I'm writing it this way. It will make sense to them. So anyway, in this Luke 7 story, so we're talking about the counter kingdom and like Jesus as the first DEI guy. You have a picture of Jesus he's been invited to one of the religious elites' home, which was common. And as he comes there is somehow a sinful woman there. Now, the text doesn't tell you until a little bit later, but one of the thoughts I had was, why was the sinful woman there? And the Pharisees, Jesus knew who was touching him, right? Because this is the woman who was like wiping. She poured perfume and wiped, was crying and wiped his feet with her tears, right? Extreme devotion, extreme
intimacy
and repentance, and I think extreme gratitude, I guess, is for being in the presence of such a holy man who would then be in the presence of her, knowing who she was. But I just think, why was she there in that crowd anyway? Did she have some rich clients?
Oh, true.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, like a Pharisee?
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Right? Like, she's the call girl, but
it's like somebody that's like, I saw Pastor at the bar. It's like, funny you was there.
So, yeah. That's right. Lecrae, shout out. So, anyway, I was thinking about that. But so the Pharisees, Jesus knows what the Pharisees are thinking. They're thinking this, right? I can't believe they're talking in the corner. I can't believe if he was really a prophet, he would know that this is like a hooker. This is a woman of the night, with him. They call her a sinful woman. And so he asked the host, Simon, who's the host, Pharisee, hey, Simon, let me ask you a question. Who do you think would feel more gratitude in this situation? You got a master, and two people owe him money, or lender. Two people owe him. One of them owes him $10. One of them owes $100. I'm simplifying. This is the Jeff translation. He forgives them both.
JSB.
The JSB. Yeah. He forgives both debts. Which one do you think is going to be more grateful?
The one that has bigger debt.
The one that has a bigger debt.
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, you've answered correctly, Simon. This woman here, right? This woman at my feet, she's not like, I came into your home. You didn't wash my feet, which would have been standard, customary practice. You go into someone's home, There is a basin of water. They take off their sandals because it's dusty. There's not paved roads.
Yeah.
And they would have somebody wash their feet. There would be a towel there. That's standard operating procedure.
Yeah.
Any good Jew would have been doing that. Any good host, any good Roman, any good
just
anybody.
hospitality.
Just hospitality. And we know in the Middle East they are all
It'd
about
be like
hospitality.
offering a water for us because we don't have
If
hospitality.
if I invited you over to my home and
Yeah.
didn't give you something to drink or whatever,
You'd be like, dude, what?
I mean, that's just so. This is not, and I'm thinking that he didn't do it because he looked at even Jesus this way as an outcast. Why would I give that outcast, right? So he says, "You didn't offer me any water for my feet. You didn't anoint me with oil." Because oil was a way in that day and age to really refresh the face. They're in a dry climate, right? They're not washing all the time. It's a moisturizer. It's a natural, moisturizer. So he's like, you didn't give me that. And there was another thing, I forget what it is, but he said there's something else that he didn't do. But this woman has not stopped, cleaning my feet, wiping her hair, her eyes and tears with her hair, and cleaning my feet. She did all of this stuff that you should be doing as the host. And you're going to bang on this girl because she's somehow low, but yet you didn't even have the common decency and courtesy to do this for me. And so he makes this point, lets it hang in the air, and then tells the lady, go, your sins are forgiven, which is wild because they're like, who is this that can forgive sins?
Yeah.
So clearly the text is clear about it, that there's something, he is not claiming to be just a man, because the only body that can forgive sins is...
Exactly. Especially hey, hold up, there's a process.
Correct.
We have a whole process for forgiving sins.
Correct. You don't just get to
you can't
arbitrarily
just say
declare
that.
it.
Yeah.
It's like, what was it, tax-free holiday? What was that, Seinfeld? Oh, you don't know Seinfeld. Oh, you guys are out there know Seinfeld, but he basically does that. You can't just declare it.
Oh, declare a day?
Yeah.
Today's
it's like holiday. That's not how it works. You have to go.
And then it's wait, how do we declare a day? Yeah.
Anyway, I wish I was...
Jesus, you can't just tell her she's forgiven. There's ways. So he's displaying authority.
So he's displaying authority, but he's displaying compassion. But again, you have, who did he come? He come to set the oppressed free. And in some ways, she's oppressed because she is caught in this cycle of selling her body to get by, which apparently there's plenty of guys. And my guess is the poor people, they don't have money. There's a market. So it's the rich who are actually doing this, right? Yeah. And that's why I think that
we're supposedly the blessed and favored.
We're supposedly the blessed. Yeah, good. That's a good connection.
Yeah.
So I look at that and go, okay, if that person can be in the kingdom, Jesus came and said, you can be in the kingdom. Not all these people who have a successful business and have clout in the community, who live in nice homes, who have a bunch of money. You woman of the night, you can be. And it reminded me of a couple things. How does that relate to today? And I'll see what your take is on that. But when I was reading this earlier and thinking about what we were going to talk about, there was a gal that used to come into our church. And she was a former woman of the night. And I don't know the full story, but she had, I don't know if she was saved or not, but she was faithful. I mean, came every week, came with her boyfriend, and they're both, you could tell they lived a wild life, but both very attractive, right? And she's still kind of dressed, in her former way.
Yeah.
Of living.
Almost not knowing that, just innocently, or maybe not, who knows, but
who knows?
Still dressing.
But my take on it was always she doesn't have anybody who's discipled her to really know, right? So she's I don't know if she's saved or not, but she's coming week after week, and she's sitting in the front row she wants to be with Jesus. She wants to meet with Jesus. Now, I don't know her heart. I could be totally wrong about this. I'm just looking from the outside in. I'm not the one to go disciple her, of course. But I remember thinking, why aren't there women flocking to this woman? And instead, there was a lot of whispering, if I'm just being honest. Who does she think she is? Why doesn't she cover up? That's that kind of and it just reminds me of the story.
Yeah.
Right? Where it's here you have a woman who is trying to get to Jesus, and we are impeding her from getting there.
Yeah.
Right?
No, I had a buddy of mine, and we had this Bible study that turned into like a big Bible study called Citizens. And in the beginning of it, it was just a few of us, like 4 of us. And one time, one of his friends came over who was he had just gotten out of prison, did a 7-year bid, got saved in prison, and was studying the scriptures like just faithfully in there. Had a Bible study going on in prison. And when he came out, he was like, the church doesn't know what to do with guys like us. He was like, sometimes I miss my fellowship behind bars.
Wow.
Because there was no like, you have to be perfect. It was just like, even if it's dangerous for us to worship Jesus because people want us to do things that we can't do because we follow Jesus now, you just didn't have all of these games. It was like, no, we
like
genuinely want
knew.
Jesus.
They knew, like everybody knew
who that. Yeah, there's a
I
line
know who
drawn.
you are.
There's
Like,
a line drawn on the floor. Yeah. So, like, but one of the things that he talked about was that, like, when you go to a church and they find out, later on, like, yeah, I just got out of a 7-year bid. Now what? Now people start looking at you different. They don't sit as close to you. And especially if you don't have a community to help you like freshen up and have a place to live and blah, blah, blah. Like, but what's the church doing?
Yeah.
Like, what are we doing that we look at people and say, you come from or maybe even at your own fault, you did things. And it's like, have you forgotten have you forgotten the amount of sin God has forgiven you? But just because you didn't get arrested for it.
Yeah.
You're better than them.
Yeah.
And that's really what happens here, right? Is like Simon has a improper view of his own sin.
Yeah, that's
he's
right.
lost. He's become entitled.
Mm-hmm. And the church, which at that time would have been the Jewish elite, like the synagogue, but today it would be like the pastors and then just the people who are in that crowd, like the people who want the life of the temple, the life of a synagogue, like they want community, right? And so, their leaders are maybe leading them astray, but they're not willing to stand up for truth. They're not willing to stand up for the underdog, to stand up for those who are marginalized. And the one thing that Jesus did is that. I mean, he stood up for the marginalized. And so I think for us, as we're just thinking about this, we have to, one of the questions that I was, prompted here, do churches feel comfortable with the poor in their community or with the powerful? Like which one are they actually more geared to like serve and to like cozy up to?
It's one of those things that your
tough.
actions are louder than your sermons.
Yeah, that's right. I'm just saying, and I am not trying to be disrespectful to our churches or our pastors,
because there are churches out there doing.
Correct, but if we were really honest, what would we say? Are we more? And listen, I'm talking to myself as well, right? Like, if given an opportunity to spend time with a poor person, materially poor, or a kind of wealthier or powerful person, my natural inclination is that powerful, wealthy person, right? Because ultimately they are a resource to me. Now, I may be genuinely interested in them and genuinely interested in their story, but I can get something too, right?
Yeah.
That poor person has got nothing. This sinful woman had nothing, right? A girl who at 16 gets pregnant and decides to have her baby, what can she really offer you, church?
Nothing.
She can offer you nothing. But what are you offering her? And what's the message? Was it one of condemnation? Oh, you woman of the night?
Yeah.
And that's a question that we need to ask ourselves, because we can talk about it on a podcast like, oh, yeah, I know we needed to be this. But what about in real life?
Yeah. 100%.
Are we willing?
Yeah.
Right?
Well, that reminds me of Luke 14, 13 through 21, where he talks about like doing to others, even like, all right, so I'll just read it. But when you give a feast, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind, and you will be blessed, because they cannot repay you, for you will be repaid at the resurrection of the just. When one of those who reclined at the table with him heard these things, he said to him, Blessed is everyone who will eat bread in the kingdom of God. But he said to them, A man once gave a great banquet and invited many, and at the time of the banquet set his servant to say to those who had been invited, Come, for everything is now ready. But they all alike began to make excuse. The first said to him, I have bought a field, and I must go out and see it. So they all gave their excuses, right? And then further on, he says, so the servant came and reported all these things. And then the master of the house became angry and said to the servant, go out quickly to the streets and lanes of the city and bring in the poor and crippled and blind and lame. So right there, Jesus is giving that example. And how often do we think to do that? How often do we think to, I think there's another verse where Jesus says, when you throw a banquet, to set in the seat of honor the person that can't repay anything to you, and then in the seat that they would be in, put the person that is worth, more.
Yeah, that's right.
And so, like, how often do we as men think to have a longer conversation with the person that we view as lesser? Or how often do we invite someone out for breakfast, lunch, dinner, coffee, that there is literally no business transaction, there is no social transaction. Even so many times, like I see it on Instagram all the time with my friends that are Christians, like, and this is probably myself as well, like, it's great, you have friends, and you should enjoy your friends, but how much time do you spend intentionally building relationships that you do not profit from, not just financially, not socially, but even just out of like pure, I just enjoy, like, we have a good time because we both like football or because we both like music. But this is someone you have no common ground with. Yeah. The whole goal is the gospel. Yeah. How often do we do that? And I'd say not often at all.
Yeah, not often enough, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, so when you look at Jesus, and it's, I don't know, it's easy for me to be hypercritical, or us all to be hypercritical, but I hope it's not coming across that way.
No, because we do it too.
Yeah, like when I am talking about this, I'm preaching to myself.
Yeah.
And this lesson about inclusivity and this, Jesus being the original DEI guy, like that is a reminder to me as I read through these passages that I cannot be narrow-minded. Yes, I have convictions. I'm not saying not be convictional. But let's be open to people. We can shut down ideas. Like we can, or just discuss it. We don't have to shut them down. Just discuss. We can discuss ideas. And if they're not appropriate, they're not in line with what we know God would want, then yeah, just quietly disagree or whatever. Just say, you know what, I just can't go there. But I respect you.
Yeah,
I respect you as a person and as an image bearer, and so I'm not going to write you off. And when I say, I think you mentioned this in the early on the podcast, when I say I pray for you, I probably wouldn't even say that because people will take that as being like,
But genuinely pray for your enemy.
But generally pray, like in our...
Take a moment and pray for them.
Yeah, in our prayer closet, right? Where it's like, let me pray, so...
Yeah, so maybe a practical thing that you guys could take away, as well as us, like, take a prayer session this week and sit down and pray for people that you typically wouldn't. Pray for a person that committed a very specific type of crime that you have no tolerance for, and pray that God redeems that type of person. Pray for the political leaning people that you disagree with, like literally, and maybe even you have people in mind that you don't believe will change, and pray that God not only... your prayer shouldn't be like, God, have justice. I mean,
smite them.
Yeah, which, fine, pray for God to have justice. But in that one session of prayer, just pray for blessing and pray for goodness to come their way and for God to convict where he needs to and encourage them where they need to. I think that's a very small but easy, practical step in doing this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you guys for joining us on the Patros Podcast. We will see you guys next week.